Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little reckless. We're not just going to talk about the Middle Ages, we're going to imagine that you wake up right there, in the middle of it. No warm bed, no phone, no bathroom, no breakfast smoothie. Just you in a century that has no idea what Wi-Fi is. People always say, I wish I could travel back to medieval Europe, and I have to ask, are you sure? Because most of you, and I'm including myself here, wouldn't even last a day. That's right, one single day. It's not the swords or the knights you need to worry about. It's the small stuff, the smells, the mud, the food that's barely food, the complete lack of soap, the surprise appearances of animals in places you thought were private. That's what we're going to explore tonight. And to make it more fun, we're not going to do it from a distance. I want you to feel this step by step, like you've accidentally time traveled and now have to figure out how to survive without a clue. You'll wake up on a damp straw mattress, try to find breakfast that doesn't exist, trip over a pig, and realize just how much we all depend on modern comforts we don't even think about. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And just for fun, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's take this first step into medieval Europe together. You may want to hold your breath. You wake up to a sound that is neither a phone alarm nor a gentle piece of music. It is a rooster. A rooster that doesn't care about your sleep schedule, about your need for a slow start, or even about the concept of indoor voices. It shrieks like someone is trying to wring it out like a wet towel. That is your good morning in the Middle Ages. Your face is cold, your nose full of the smell of wet straw. The straw mattress beneath you is more lumps than mattress, the sort of thing that would get a 1-star review if mattresses could be reviewed. And because there are no sheets, the dampness creeps into your clothes. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it. It smells like earth, like something vaguely animal, and like someone recently spilled cabbage soup on the floor and decided not to clean it. There is no Febreze in the 14th century. You sit up. You can almost hear your modern instincts whispering, where is the bathroom? Where is the sink? Bad news, there is none. No bathroom, no sink, no running water. Just you, a dirt floor, and the cold dawn. Your eyes adjust to the pale light coming through the slats of the window. No glass. Glass is a luxury reserved for cathedrals and castles. For you? A few planks and some holes big enough for the wind to whistle a tune. You can feel the draft tickle your ear like a prank. When you swing your feet off the bed, they land straight in wet dirt. Squelch. Your toes sink in like they're being swallowed. You almost want to laugh, except you also almost want to cry. Sus. If you're lucky, there's a pair of rough leather slippers somewhere, but they're stiff and hard, like 2 slices of old toast tied to your feet. You stand and look around. The walls are crooked, covered with a mix of wooden sticks and dried mud. The kind of wall that feels like it would fall over if someone sneezed too loudly. If you lean on it too hard, you'll come away with bits of mud sticking to your sleeve. And this, by the way, is not you being unlucky. This is normal. In medieval Europe, unless you were noble or part of a monastery, this is what your home looked like. 1 room, maybe 2 if you're fancy. A bed stuffed with straw, a chest if you're lucky, and a smoky fire pit in the middle. No chimney. The smoke just sort of hangs out with you like an extra roommate. You notice your clothes. You slept in them. They're made of rough wool or linen, itchy enough to make your skin feel like sandpaper. And yes, there are probably a few little things living in the seams. Fleas lice the occasional tick. They don't charge rent. Outside, the village is waking up. You hear cows mooing, goats bleating, a cartwheel squeaking as if it's auditioning for a horror movie. The sound of someone chopping wood punctuates the background like a drumbeat. Dogs bark, children shout, someone swears softly because people are always listening. You go to the window, or rather, the hole pretending to be a window, and you take in the view. Mud. Just mud. The whole world is a brown watercolor painting with the occasional gray roof and the silhouette of a tree stripped bare. You squint as if maybe squinting will make it prettier. It doesn't. You're hungry. Your stomach is making noises loud enough to join the morning choir outside. You imagine pancakes, eggs, coffee. Sorry. Here, breakfast as you know it doesn't exist. Most peasants don't eat until noon because there's no time. The fields won't plow themselves. The cows need milking before anyone thinks about food. And let's say you do get something in the morning. It's probably yesterday's bread, dense, dark, so hard it could double as a doorstop. Maybe a bit of cheese that has developed an entire personality of its own. If you're very, very lucky, a weak ale to drink. Because water at this point in history is a gamble you almost always lose. Speaking of water, your mouth is dry. You think about getting a drink, but where? The bucket in the corner of the house is cloudy with bits of straw. If you want fresher water, you'll have to wait in line at the village well. And even then, that water is only slightly better. Sometimes frogs live in the well. Sometimes leaves, mud, and unlucky bugs come up in the bucket. And yet everyone drinks it. Historians have a term for this kind of water: unsafe but inevitable. That's why ale was such a staple. Even children drank small beer, with less alcohol than mouthwash. It wasn't about getting tipsy, it was about staying alive. You pull on your shoes. They feel like 2 bricks strapped to your feet. No laces, just strips of leather holding them in place. Socks. Sorry. You might wrap your feet with rags if you have them. Otherwise, it's just you, bare feet, and the mercy of medieval leather. You step outside. The cold, damp air greets you like a bucket of water over your head. Mist curls around the ground. And then you see it, mud everywhere. Deep, sticky mud. You can't even see where the road is supposed to be. Roads, in this time, are just places where people walked so often that the grass gave up. And the smell hits you. It's like all of nature decided to share one big compost bin. Animals, manure, old food, and wood smoke. If you stay long enough, you'll get used to it. Right now, though, you try breathing through your mouth and hope no one notices. A pig trots past you, heading for something invisible. A chicken scurries in the opposite direction. Children are already outside, barefoot, running around like it's a holiday. For them, the mud is normal. You realize that the only person in this scene who's panicking is you. Here's another detail that textbooks rarely mention. Shoes were expensive. A lot of kids just didn't have them. Bare feet were the default until the cold forced you to do something about it. The sun finally starts to rise, though rise is generous. It's more like it presses its face against the clouds and sighs. The light is weak, silvery, and spreads slowly over the thatched roofs. You see a group of men in woolen tunics walking by, carrying wooden tools, hoes, rakes, sickles. None of these are shiny. They are heavy, worn, patched with bits of rope or metal. These tools are older than some of the people carrying them. A cart rattles past, pulled by an ox. The wheels make deep grooves in the mud. You hear the driver curse at the ox, mildly, because everyone around is listening and you don't want the wrong words to spread. There are no secrets in a small medieval village. And the houses, from up close, they look like they're all leaning against each other for support. Some roofs are patched with turf, others with bits of old cloth. There are no straight lines anywhere. The whole place looks like someone built it while slightly dizzy. You think about finding a place to sit, maybe a dry stone. Except there aren't many stones. Everything is wood and mud. Even benches are a luxury. People stand. They squat. They get on with their lives. A little girl passes you carrying a small basket of eggs. She looks at you like she's never seen someone stand around doing nothing. And in a way, she hasn't. In this world, there's no such thing as idle time. If you're awake, you're working. Now imagine you have to do this every single day. Rain or shine. Sick or healthy. Hungry or starving. There's no, let's just Uber breakfast today. No quick snack, no delivery, no cafe around the corner. And in the middle of this, there's one more little odd fact. People genuinely didn't mind waking up early. They had no other option. Without artificial light, life moves with the sun. When the sun says wake, you wake. You tilt your head back, trying to see if maybe the sky looks friendlier. No, still gray, still heavy. You wonder how many hours are left until noon when you might finally get a piece of bread. By now you've been awake for less than an hour, and already you've learned more than you ever wanted to about medieval mornings. That the floor will try to eat your feet, that the air smells like everything at once, that people here survive more out of habit than comfort. And you've also learned this: you really, really miss your modern bed. You step out of the muddy doorway with one very modern question echoing in your head. Okay, but What's for breakfast? Your stomach doesn't care that it's the 14th century. It's ready for eggs, toast, maybe something sweet. You imagine the smell of fresh coffee drifting toward you, the kind of smell that convinces you life isn't so bad. Except, well, coffee hasn't even been introduced to Europe yet. No one here has ever tasted it. For the next few hundred years, people will survive mornings with sheer willpower alone. You glance around. There are no bakeries with pretty signs, no cozy cafes with someone scribbling orders in chalk. The closest thing you'll find to a breakfast menu is a chunk of bread that was probably baked yesterday or the day before, and is now roughly the same texture as a roof tile. Let's talk about that bread. It is not the fluffy white loaf you know. Medieval bread is heavy, dark, and full of surprises. Sometimes those surprises are grains. Sometimes those surprises are small stones that slipped into the flour while grinding. People back then literally risked chipping a tooth just to get a bite. And the flour itself? Not pure. It's mixed with whatever grain is available. Wheat if you're lucky, rye or barley if you're not. Peasants often had to eat bread with ground-up beans or even ground-up tree bark mixed in when times were hard. That makes multi-grain take on a whole new meaning. You pick up a piece, testing it with your finger. It doesn't dent. It just stands there unbothered. You tap it against the table. It makes a sound like a door knocking. If bread could roll its eyes at you, this one would. And there's no butter waiting beside it, no jam, no honey unless you're really lucky. For most people, bread is eaten plain. Maybe if you're fortunate, you dip it into a little weak ale to soften it up. This brings us to the biggest shock of your medieval morning. Breakfast isn't a thing. People here, especially peasants, simply don't stop to eat when they wake up. The idea of a slow, gentle start to the day is, well, laughable. You wake up, you get to work. You plow fields, feed animals, fix tools. Food is something that happens later when the sun is higher and you've already been awake for 5 hours. In fact, the very word breakfast wasn't widely used the way we know it today. Back then, they would call that first meal of the day dinner, or simply the day meal, and it usually didn't come until late morning or noon. But you, my time-traveling friend, still have a stomach that expects something. You wander out into the lane looking for anything. You spot a boy walking past, munching on what looks like bread. He's not really chewing it so much as holding it in his mouth like it's a stubborn problem. He sees you staring and speeds up, clearly worried you're going to ask for a bite. Now and then, you catch a whiff of smoke and see someone already stirring a pot over an open fire inside a doorway. You're tempted, but don't get too excited, it's probably pottage. That's a sort of all-purpose stew. Water, grains, beans, maybe a bit of cabbage if there's any left over from last night. It's not the hearty stew you're imagining, full of meat and vegetables. It's thin. Think warm swamp water with ambition. Meat, by the way, is rare for peasants. It's more of a festival food. On a normal day, maybe a little bit of bacon fat to flavor things. That's it. No crispy strips of bacon waiting for you, no eggs sunny side up. If you find an egg at all, it's going into the pottage, not onto a plate for you. You sit on a patch of wood that looks slightly drier than the rest of the world and watch the village begin its work. Every family here wakes before sunrise, starts their chores, and by the time the first real meal arrives, they've already burned off more calories than your modern desk job would in a week. This is when the first main history fact of the day hits you. Medieval people ate only 2 meals a day. One late morning meal, one evening meal. That's it. Breakfast as a daily routine was considered indulgent, something for the weak or the sick. The church even got involved at times. For a long while, religious authorities viewed early eating as gluttony. The rule was, get through your morning's work, then you can eat. If you were a monk, there were even stricter rules. You might wait until after prayers and manual labor, eating once, maybe twice a day. As you stand there thinking about this, a woman walks by carrying a wooden bowl full of something mushy. She's balancing it with one hand and holding a small child with the other. The mush looks like pottage, but with oats. Oats were common for the lower classes, boiled, soft, and filling. It's basically medieval oatmeal except without sugar, cinnamon, or milk. You imagine eating it plain and a small part of your soul cries. There's also another cold reality. Even that little bowl of oats depends on luck. Crops fail? Bad weather? That mush becomes thinner and thinner until it's more water than food. You overhear someone talking about their morning ale, which might sound fun until you realize it's about as alcoholic as your average bottle of kombucha. This is just their version of water safety. Do you remember how I mentioned breadstones earlier? Here's a strange little fact. Archaeologists studying medieval skeletons often find their teeth worn down because of those tiny bits of stone. Eating back then was basically like slowly sanding your own molars. You can't help but wince at the thought as you chew on a small corner of this bread, hoping to soften it. And that's when you discover another reason medieval mornings were rough. Your jaw starts to hurt. Bread this hard is not a snack, it's a workout. You chew and chew and chew and still somehow the bread manages to stay the same shape. While you gnaw on the bread, you realize that food here is less about flavor and more about fuel. A full belly means you can survive another day of work. That's it. No cinnamon rolls, no fruit smoothies, no almond lattes with extra foam. You glance toward the manor house at the far end of the fields, and for a second you think, maybe they have better food over there. You're right, they do. Nobles eat more often. Their version of breakfast sometimes includes a small piece of cheese, maybe cold meat and fresh bread that someone else baked at dawn. But you're stuck with this. There's another curious little bit of trivia. Wealthy households sometimes even had something like a breakfast drink called posset, a mix of warm milk curdled with ale or wine and flavored with spices. Sounds weird? It is. And also, you will not be getting any. Back in the village square, you notice that even the dogs look tired. One of them stretches and yawns in your direction as if to say, "You think this is hard? Try doing it every day without shoes." As the hours tick by, you slowly realize how much work goes into just getting ready to eat. Grain has to be ground by hand. Bread has to be baked in an oven that doesn't exist in your house. You take it to a communal oven and hope the baker doesn't burn it. Ale has to be brewed in advance. And if you want a stew, you better have water from the well, vegetables from the garden, and firewood you chopped yourself. And let's not even get started on utensils. If you're lucky, you have a wooden spoon. More often than not, people just use their hands. Bread can double as a plate. You tear off a chunk, put some stew on top, and when you're done, you eat the plate. By the time the sun climbs a little higher, you finally manage to get your hands on a bowl of pottage from a neighbor who takes pity on your lost expression. You sit there, blowing on the steam rising from the bowl. It smells earthy. It tastes earthy. You're not sure if that's the vegetables or the dirt that accidentally fell in. Still, when you take that first sip, something remarkable happens. The hunger dulls. It's not delicious, but it's warm. It's real food. And for the first time since waking up, you feel like you can stand upright again. You finish it, wipe your hands on your tunic, and realize, this whole messy, muddy, bare-bones process is your breakfast now. Not because you planned it, but because medieval life doesn't plan around you. You look at the rest of the day ahead. More mud, more work, more food that takes forever to get to your mouth. And it hits you. You're already longing for your kitchen back home, where breakfast could be as simple as opening a fridge. Here, breakfast is a privilege. Survival, not a ritual. And now that your stomach is at least partially satisfied, the day really begins. You stare at your clothes. You've been in this damp, scratchy shirt since last night, and your modern brain says, okay, time for a wardrobe change. Because surely, in a world with no breakfast, at least you deserve the small joy of fresh clothes. You glance around the little room you slept in, searching for a drawer, a wardrobe, even a hook. There's nothing. Just a wooden chest in the corner, and when you open it, it lets out a faint, musty smell like someone packed hay and despair inside. Inside, you find the grand total of another shirt that looks almost exactly like the one you're wearing, a pair of hose that are really just two very long socks pretending to be pants, and something that might be a cloak if you squint. Welcome to medieval fashion. This is it. There are no neat rows of outfits, no colors of the week, no express yourself with style. Clothes are expensive to make, and you own a handful of pieces that must last for years. And yes, they rarely, if ever, get washed. You pull the spare shirt out. It is heavy. It smells faintly of smoke, like the fireplace has clung to it for months. You give it a little shake, hoping to air it out, and a cloud of dust floats up like a ghost escaping from a bottle. As you tug off your damp shirt, You can already feel your skin sigh with relief. But this relief doesn't last long because the next shirt is made of the exact same material. Coarse, scratchy wool. You slip it over your head and instantly feel like you're being lightly sanded from the shoulders down. This is the first real lesson about medieval clothing. Comfort was not part of the design. Wool and linen are the staples. Cotton isn't common here yet, it has to come from far away and costs a fortune. So, that's reserved for nobles and clergy. You, as an ordinary villager, are stuck with whatever the sheep or the flax fields provide. And it's not just the fabric. It's the cut. Medieval clothes are designed more like sacks than like tailored garments. The shirt is long, nearly to your knees, and there is no such thing as elastic. Everything either hangs on you or is tied down with cords. You put on the hose next, which is a fun adventure. Instead of pants, you have two separate tubes, one for each leg, made out of wool. You pull them up like very tall socks, attach them to a belt or a drawstring at your waist, and hope they don't slide down during the day. Sitting in them feels like trying to bend your knees in cardboard. And just when you think you're done, there's the tunic. A slightly thicker, slightly longer version of the shirt worn over everything else. It's like dressing in layers for winter even when the weather isn't cold. Oh, and if you're unlucky, you may also have to put on a hood. A separate piece of fabric with a pointed tip that drapes over your shoulders. Think of it as a medieval hoodie, but without the soft fleece and without the vibe. And now comes the moment that makes your skin crawl. The fleece. As soon as you put the new shirt on, you notice it, something moving. A tiny prickling on your shoulder. Then another on your back. You slap at it. Another itch pops up on your arm. This, my friend, is a medieval reality. Clothes come with bugs. Fleas, lice, and mites were practically roommates for everyone back then. They lived in the seams of clothing, in the straw of mattresses, even in the folds of your hood. People scratched constantly. There's a reason you'll see so many old manuscripts with people holding combs or sitting near a fire. They were picking out lice. Washing clothes was hard. Soap was expensive. And even if you had soap, washing clothes in cold water and drying them slowly next to a smoky fire wasn't enough to kill all the little creatures. Historians even have records of people using their fingernails to squash lice one by one, or holding their shirts close to a candle flame so that the heat would make the bugs fall off. It's as unromantic as it sounds. You try to ignore it and keep dressing. You add a belt made of rope or leather to hold everything together because without it, all these layers just flap around. At this point you're sweating. Dressing in the Middle Ages isn't quick. There are ties and laces and bits that have to be adjusted just right. It's a workout before the real work of the day has even begun. You think about footwear. If you own shoes, they're leather. If you don't, it's bare feet again. Today you pull on those stiff leather shoes from earlier, hoping they'll at least keep the bugs from biting your ankles. You catch sight of yourself in a small piece of polished metal, your closest thing to a mirror. You look basic. There's no other word for it. There is nothing to distinguish you from the rest of the village. No bright colors, no patterns. Just plain, natural shades of brown and gray. Why? Because dyes are expensive. Only the rich can afford colors like deep red, royal blue, or bright green. For peasants, clothing color depends on the sheep. Off-white, beige, brown. Maybe a faint yellow if you used onion skins to dye it yourself. There's one more thing you notice, the smell. Even though this shirt has been aired out, it still carries a smell that clings. A mix of wood smoke, sweat, and time. In a world where everything is washed infrequently, the smell of clothing just becomes part of life. If you were wealthy, you'd have a different experience entirely. Nobles wore fine linen close to the skin, silk on top, and bright colors that announced their status. They also had servants to launder and brush their clothes. They could even afford something resembling fashion trends. But you're dressing purely to survive. Every piece is about function. And here's the weird part. Once you're finally dressed, the clothes are heavy. You can feel the weight on your shoulders. These are not fabrics that move with you. They resist. You try to stretch your arms and the fabric says, "No thanks, we don't do flexibility here." You walk outside in your fresher outfit and no one notices. No one compliments you because literally everyone is wearing some version of the same thing. Individual style isn't a thing for most people. If your tunic has no holes, you're already winning. A cold wind blows through the village, and for a moment you're grateful for all the layers. Then a flea bites your neck, and that gratitude disappears. As you walk, you spot someone sitting in the sun, slowly running a wooden comb through their hair, holding a piece of cloth underneath to catch lice. They glance at you, shrug, and keep going. This is just normal. And here's an odd fact you might not know. People often shared clothes. In large families, clothes were passed down, patched, and repatched until they were nothing but scraps. New fabric was expensive. Threadbare was normal. If you tear something, you don't throw it out, you fix it. A tunic might be patched with a completely different color of fabric. Some surviving medieval clothing looks like a quilt of random bits. And if you're wondering about underwear, well, here's the disappointing truth. Underwear as you know it didn't really exist. There were linen brays, a kind of loose undershorts for men, and sometimes a linen shift for women. That's it. Forget the idea of clean, snug underwear. The rest of the day as you try to work, your new clothes rub against your skin. Every movement is a reminder that medieval fabric was not made for comfort. You bend down and the hose cut into your thighs. You straighten and the tunic bunches around your waist. By noon you're itchy, sweaty, and stiff. And all because you thought, for one hopeful moment, that a change of clothes might help you feel better. In the Middle Ages, fashion is pain. Not because you're trying to look good, but because surviving the basic act of getting dressed feels like an endurance test. By the time the sun is high, you've learned your lesson. A new shirt won't make life here easier. If anything, it just reminds you that no matter how much you scratch, there will always be another flea, another patch of rough wool, and another day of the same. And for the first time, you start to appreciate something you used to take for granted: modern fabric. You have made it through the morning, and now your throat feels like it has been lined with sand. There is one simple, innocent thing you want more than anything else: a drink of water. It sounds easy, doesn't it? In your time, it's the most basic request in the world. You just turn on a tap, fill a glass, and drink without thinking twice. Here, forget it. You step outside with your modern optimism and look around the village. There is a river a short walk away. You can see the sunlight bouncing off it like a silver ribbon, and for a moment you feel hope. Clear running water. You can almost imagine cupping your hands and drinking it straight. Except everyone around you looks at that river with the same level of trust you would give to a suspiciously glowing green smoothie. There's a reason. Let's start with the basics. The river is the medieval equivalent of a neighborhood trash bin. It's where everything goes. You know how in modern times people say, "Don't drink the water in a strange place or you'll get sick"? Now multiply that advice by about 1,000. People bathe in the river. They wash their clothes in the river. They dump kitchen scraps in the river. They empty chamber pots, the contents of their very basic toilets, into the river. Sometimes they even toss dead animals in there. And in towns, tanneries and workshops pour whatever chemicals they use right into that same stream. So, yes, technically there's water there, but it comes with a few bonus ingredients: animal waste, human waste, rotten vegetables, and whatever diseases have decided to float downstream that week. You look again at that shimmering surface. It's like a mirage. The more you stare, the less you want to drink it. But your tongue is sticking to the roof of your mouth, so you ask someone, "Where do you get water to drink?" The woman next to you gives you a look that says, "Clearly you don't know how things work here," and points to the center of the village. You head that way and soon you find the well. This is the medieval water source, and while it's a little safer than the river, don't get your hopes up too high. The well is basically a deep hole lined with stones where water collects. People lower buckets, pull them back up, and carry them home. The good news: the water in a well doesn't have as much surface contamination as a river. The bad news: it's still not safe by modern standards. Wells are open. Things fall in. Sometimes frogs live there. Bugs, leaves, and dirt are just part of the deal. You watch as a man hauls up a bucket, and sure enough, there's a little something extra floating in it. A bit of straw, a small insect, and something that might be a tiny fish. He scoops it out with his hand and shrugs. The bucket itself doesn't exactly inspire confidence either. The wooden slats are stained from years of use, and the rope smells faintly of mildew. People share the same rope and bucket, so whatever is on your neighbor's hands will soon be on yours. And here is a cold, inconvenient fact. Medieval water can make you sick. We're talking stomach cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, basically your entire digestive system waving a white flag. Infections and dysentery are so common that, in some years, they take out more people than actual warfare. That's why, strange as it might sound, people here drink more ale than water. Small beer, weak ale with very low alcohol, is the drink of choice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even children drink it. The process of brewing, which involves boiling water, makes it much safer to consume than raw well water. If you're wealthy, you might also drink wine, but for a villager like you, ale is your new water. Still, you try the bucket. You scoop up some water in your hands and sniff it. It smells earthy. You take a sip because thirst is stronger than reason right now. It's cold at least, but it has a faint taste of soil, as if you just licked the ground. You tell yourself you'll only drink a little. You tell yourself you'll be fine. And then you see the neighbor next to you casually dunk a cloth into the same bucket, wash their hands, and leave it there to drip back in. Suddenly, your confidence vanishes. You glance back toward the river. Part of you wonders, how bad could it really be? Here's a fun little fact. Archaeologists have analyzed sediment from medieval rivers and found that they were loaded with bacteria, parasites, and even traces of heavy metals from early industrial workshops. People didn't know about germs yet, but they definitely knew about the consequences. And yet, you still see some kids splashing in the river. They laugh, they get water up their noses, and somehow some of them survive. Medieval immune systems are, let's just say, they get a lot of practice. You, on the other hand, are an outsider. One mouthful of that water, and you might not make it through the week. A man passing by notices your hesitation and tells you with a grin, drink ale. Live longer. He's not wrong. Of course, brewing ale is no quick task. First, you need grain, usually barley. You soak it, sprout it, dry it, and crush it. Then you boil it in water, strain it, and let it ferment for a few days. The alcohol content ends up being so low that it barely qualifies, but it's just enough to kill off some harmful bacteria. And so, most households keep a jug of ale ready. Not because anyone is partying, but because they want to avoid lying in bed sick for a week. The irony here is almost painful. You are surrounded by water, but you can't drink it without risk. Every sip is a gamble. You start to understand why wells are such a social hub. Everyone gathers there, men, women, kids, to pull up water, share news, complain about the weather, and sometimes argue about whose bucket touched whose rope. And then there's the issue of carrying it home. A full wooden bucket of water is heavy. Really heavy. There are no lightweight bottles, no handles with ergonomic grips. You either balance it on your shoulder, carry it with both hands, or if you're lucky, use a yoke across your back with two buckets swinging from it. Halfway home, you spill some. That's normal. Everyone spills. By the time you finally set it down inside the house, you're sweating like you've run a marathon. You take another look at the bucket. Little bits of debris float to the top, and you wonder, should you boil it? You could, but fuel is precious. Firewood takes time to chop. Charcoal costs money. People here only boil water when absolutely necessary. Instead, you decide to take the local advice and pour a little ale into it. Diluting water with ale doesn't fix everything, but it's one of those medieval life hacks that people swear by. As you sit down with your drink, a few drops spill onto your hands and you notice something else. Even clean hands here aren't really clean. Soap is made from animal fat and ashes and is far too valuable to use constantly. Most people wash with just water, which, well, you can see the cycle, right? Dirty hands in the bucket, everyone drinking from the same source. It's like a group project where everyone is bringing germs to the table. There is another, less obvious source of water: rain. People sometimes collect rainwater in barrels or cisterns. It's fresher, but it also picks up everything from the roof on the way down: bits of thatch, bird droppings, insects. And unless you drink it quickly, stagnant rainwater becomes its own swamp within a few days. So here's the reality. In medieval Europe, thirst isn't just thirst. It's a puzzle. You are constantly trying to balance survival with the risk of getting sick. And let's not even start on winter. When the well freezes, water collection turns into a game of hacking at ice, hauling up freezing buckets and hoping you don't slip in. As you sit there sipping your questionable ale water mix, a group of kids runs past, laughing. They're chasing each other with sticks, but every now and then they bend down and scoop up some water from the well with their bare hands. They don't even think about it. You, however, are thinking very hard. About modern plumbing. About bottled water. About every time you have ever complained that tap water tastes weird. You would trade your soul right now for that weird taste. The afternoon sun makes the water in your bucket warm, and after a few hours it starts to smell faintly metallic. You try to ignore it. There's nothing else to drink. By evening, you finally understand something fundamental about this world. Survival here isn't just about having food. It's about having something safe to drink. One careless sip can take you from working in the fields to lying in bed feverish for days, or worse. You glance at the bucket one last time before bed and think, tomorrow I'm sticking to the ale. No arguments. You finally step out of the cramped little house, thinking maybe a walk will clear your head. You imagine a calm stroll, something gentle, maybe even picturesque. After all, how bad could a medieval village street be? It's not like there are cars, right? No horns, no traffic jams. Just you, the sky, and a road that might, if you're lucky, lead you somewhere peaceful. And then you take your first breath. You freeze halfway through that inhale because whatever just entered your nose is powerful. It's the kind of smell that makes your eyes water and your brain consider retreat. You stand there, blinking, trying to decide what it is. Smoke? Manure? Rotten food? What dog? The answer is yes. Yes to all of it, all at once, layered together like some sort of invisible, ever-present stew. The street, if we can even call it that, is just a dirt path. When it rains, it turns into a mud pit. Right now, the sun is out, but the ground is still soft, and every step you take makes your shoes squelch. If you're wearing hose and leather shoes like you are now, this is not a comforting sensation. And here's the first big truth. These streets are shared by everyone and everything. Chickens dart across in front of you, pecking at invisible treasures in the muck. A pig waddles past with surprising determination, clearly on its way to somewhere important. A couple of geese eye you suspiciously, their necks craning like nosy neighbors. And then there are the cows. Yes, cows. They wander freely because, well, fences are a luxury. Every single one of these animals leaves behind, let's call it, evidence of their visit. And since there's no one assigned to clean it up, it just stays there. Sometimes people sweep it to the side with a broom made of twigs, but that just makes a pile on the edge of the path. Mixed into all that are the remains of daily life. Old straw from bedding, broken pottery, cabbage leaves, fish guts. Medieval waste management is basically, throw it outside and let nature sort it out. And remember how we talked about chamber pots? This is where they end up too. If you're unlucky enough to be walking past when someone tips one out the window, you get a very personal introduction to medieval sanitation. You can't help but start walking closer to the middle of the street, away from the buildings, because hugging the walls feels dangerous. But the middle isn't exactly safe either. It's just where the mud is thickest. And if it rains, the whole thing becomes a slow-moving soup, a sort of brown gravy that coats your shoes and never really dries. Your nose starts to adapt, but just as you think you've adjusted, a cart rumbles past. The wheels hit a particularly wet patch, and you are immediately baptized in muddy droplets. The cart driver doesn't even look back. This is normal. You start to notice other details now. The sound, for example. It's never quiet. There's the lowing of cattle, the clucking of chickens, people shouting across the street, hammers ringing from a blacksmith's workshop, and dogs barking. Always dogs. Occasionally, someone tries to get a tune out of a flute or a hurdy-gurdy, but the music competes with the chaos and mostly loses. The visual scene is no less busy. Houses are close together, with upper stories that lean over the street so much that two people could probably shake hands out of their windows. Laundry hangs on lines, dripping onto anyone unfortunate enough to be walking underneath. And as you step carefully between puddles, a strange sort of pattern emerges. The street is alive. Not clean. Not organized. But alive. Of course, that doesn't make it comfortable. Let's pause for a small but important fact. In many medieval towns, the street was the sewer. Unless you're in a city wealthy enough to have some form of gutter system, everything flows right down the middle. Some towns try to deal with this by making a shallow trench so waste has somewhere to go, but guess where that trench is? right where you're trying to walk. People sometimes throw ash from their fireplaces on top of the muck, hoping to dry it out and cover the smell. It helps, a little. You try breathing through your mouth, which helps with the smell but makes you feel like you're tasting the air, which is not better. A dog runs by with something suspiciously bone-shaped in its mouth, and you decide not to ask questions. The children here don't seem to mind. They play in the street, skipping over piles of mud like it's just part of the game. Their shoes are barely shoes, so when they come home covered in grime, no one bats an eye. One boy, seeing your horrified face, laughs and says, "You're walking like the ground's made of fire." You glance down. He's not wrong. You are tiptoeing, picking your path like someone navigating a minefield. And here's where you stumble on a bit of fascinating trivia. There was in some cities a rule about which side of the road people should use for walking, to avoid bumping into each other. In London, for example, at one point there were ordinances telling carts and horses to keep to the left. But in a village like this, it's chaos. Every person, every animal, every cart is going wherever they want. You sidestep a pile of something unidentifiable and almost bump into a man carrying a huge bundle of firewood. He mutters something at you that probably isn't a compliment. A few steps later, you almost collide with a goose. You both freeze, sizing each other up, and you remember something important. Geese are fearless. It honks at you, you apologize, yes, to a goose, and take the long way around. Then there are the sounds of human life spilling out of doorways. A blacksmith's hammer, a weaver's shuttle, the rhythmic thump of someone grinding grain on a corn stone. Every house is a little factory of survival. And of course there's gossip. People talk loudly here. Conversations are public. You don't even need to eavesdrop. Everyone just broadcasts their business like it's the village radio. Now let's talk about shoes for a second. Remember your medieval leather shoes? They were not designed for this. They're thin. You feel everything. Every rock, every wet spot. Your feet are damp and they will stay damp. No socks thick enough to save you. The more you walk, the more you realize just how much dirt, dust, and waste you've picked up. You could wipe your shoes forever and still not get them clean. And that smell sticks to you. It follows you like a shadow. You smell it in your hair, on your clothes. By the time you sit down somewhere, you can't tell where the street ends and you begin. By now, you're asking yourself, how does anyone live like this? The answer, they don't notice it anymore. When this is your everyday life, your brain just edits it out. In fact, there's an odd sort of etiquette to it. People know better than to judge someone for being dirty. Everyone's dirty. If you can see the color of someone's original tunic, they must be rich. Let's add a quirky historical note. In some towns, pigs were actually considered part of the sanitation system. They roamed freely, eating garbage. It was like having little four-legged trash collectors, though of course they left their own mess behind. Some cities eventually banned them because of how chaotic it got. You can see why. One particularly large pig in front of you is rooting through a pile of discarded cabbage and fish bones. It gives you a long look like, don't even think about it, this is mine, and you decide to walk around. Every so often, someone throws a bucket of water, or something that looks like water, into the street to try to wash things away. This only works for a few minutes. Then everything just blends together again. And then there's the sound of the church bell ringing from somewhere far away, cutting through all the noise. It's one of the few things that brings everyone to a pause. For a moment, even the pigs seem to listen. You find yourself thinking of the modern word street, and how much it implies. Sidewalks, clean paving, lines painted in white. Here there are no lines. There are no rules. It's a shared living mess. And yet, despite the chaos, there's also a strange sense of energy. This is the heart of the village. Everything happens here. Trade, announcements, gossip, arguments, games. The street is like a giant, open-air living room. But at the end of the day, when you finally return home, one thing is clear. It is not clean. You peel off your shoes, shake them out, and a little pile of mud and who knows what spills onto the floor. You wash your hands with the tiniest bit of water you can spare, but the smell doesn't leave. Lying on your straw mattress that night, you stare at the ceiling and think, tomorrow maybe I'll just stay inside. And then you remember, tomorrow you'll have to go out there again because everything you need, food, water, life, is in that noisy, muddy, manure-scented street. You wake up the next morning with an optimistic thought. Maybe today it won't smell so bad. This optimism lasts exactly 3 seconds. The moment you sit up, you're greeted by the same thick, sour air that has been slowly marinating everything in this house overnight. It's a mix of smoke from last night's fire, damp straw, unwashed bodies, and a faint note of whatever the family had for dinner yesterday. You decide to be brave and take a deep breath through your nose, trying to get used to it. Big mistake. The air feels like it coats the inside of your head. It's not sharp, it's heavy. And you suddenly realize something. It isn't just the house. It's everyone, including you. You try to remember when you last had a real bath. You can't because that bath probably hasn't happened yet. Not the way you think of bathing. You might be picturing a nice hot shower, steam rising, clean water pouring over your shoulders. Maybe a bar of fragrant soap. Maybe a towel so soft it feels like a hug. Now erase that. All of it. In medieval Europe, bathing is a rare event. Let's start with why. Clean water is hard to come by, as you've already discovered. Heating it takes an absurd amount of effort. You'd need a big pot, a fire, and enough fuel to warm a whole tub. And that's assuming you even own a tub big enough to sit in. Most people don't. So instead of a bath, you get a basin of cold water. You splash your face, maybe your hands. If you're feeling ambitious, you rinse your armpits. That's it. That is the full spa experience. And soap? Technically it exists. People make it out of animal fat and ashes. It smells exactly as appealing as that combination sounds. And because it's valuable, you use it sparingly, more for washing clothes than for yourself. There's also a strange medieval fear. Some people believe that bathing too often, especially in hot water, opens your pores and lets sickness creep in. In fact, when the Black Death hit, many people avoided baths because they thought they'd make themselves more vulnerable. So instead of cleaning, they cover the smell. This is where herbs and perfumes come in. If you can afford them, you might tuck a little sprig of rosemary or lavender into your clothes, like a wearable air freshener. Nobles sometimes carry pomanders, little metal balls filled with fragrant things, to sniff when they can't take it anymore. You have none of that. You step outside into the street, hoping the fresh air will help. It doesn't. Because here's the truth, outside doesn't smell fresh either. The whole street smells like the people who live there, plus the animals, plus whatever was thrown out the window yesterday. It's a whole village sharing one big scent. And you are now officially part of that scent. You pass by a group of people and notice something. No one smells like nothing. Everyone has a smell. It's not just body odor, it's layers. Sweat from yesterday, smoke from the hearth, wool that hasn't been washed in months, and a faint sour note of milk or cheese that seems to stick to everything. After a while, your brain starts to catalog the differences. There's the spent all day in the fields smell, earthy, hay-like. The worked with animals smell, stronger, sharper, and the has been near a tannery smell, which, honestly, you try to avoid. Here's a fun but slightly disgusting detail. People use their bed sheets as a kind of cleaning cloth. You rub yourself down with them to get rid of surface grime. This is why bedding gets so dirty so fast, and also why the smell of old straw never really goes away. Occasionally, you might hear about bathhouses. In towns and cities, public bathhouses exist, but they're not an everyday thing. You might go once a week if you're lucky. Once a month is more realistic. And in the countryside? A bathhouse is a rumor, not a real place. You do spot a small stream a little farther from the main road, and for a second you consider just jumping in. But then you remember everything you learned about water quality. You'd come out wetter, yes, but not cleaner. Some wealthy houses might have wooden tubs. If you're in one of those, congratulations. You can sit in warm water while everyone else stands around with a damp rag. But here in this little village, your luxury is a bucket. Even hair washing is rare. Instead, people brush and braid their hair to keep it from turning into a nest. Combs, often made of wood or bone, are essential. They aren't just for styling, they're for removing lice. And speaking of lice, there's no amount of washing that will fully get rid of them. Your new clothes from yesterday already introduced you to their biting little cousins. They're your companions now. So you try to ignore it. You breathe shallowly. You tell yourself, I'll get used to it. And then someone walks by carrying a tray of fresh cheese. You'd think cheese would smell good, right? Except this cheese was made this morning, probably in the same room where the family sleeps, and it has a warm, farmy odor that mixes into the air like another layer on an already complex cake. Your stomach tries to decide if it's hungry or just confused. You wander past a group of people gathered near the well, and the smell intensifies again. It's like a wall. People here stand close when they talk. Very close. There's no concept of personal space as you know it, so you end up breathing in everyone else's presence whether you like it or not. And here's an unexpected consequence. Your own smell stops bothering you after a while. It's everyone else's that gets to you first. A man next to you lifts his arm to adjust the rope on the well bucket, and you catch a breeze of what can only be described as barn mixed with summer heat. You step back, but there's no room. Someone else is right behind you, smelling strongly of smoke. Your modern reflex is to hold your breath. It works for about 10 seconds before you give up and just accept that this is your new reality. There's a reason why medieval love stories never mention how people smell. It's not that people didn't notice. It's just that everyone smelled equally questionable, so no one had an advantage. For fun, here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some nobles sprinkled rose petals or herbs on the floor of their great hall so that when people walked over them, they crushed the petals and released a nicer scent. It worked a little. If you're a king, you can afford to live in a scented hallway. But for the rest of the world? Dirt floors, dirt smells. Even animals add to the background perfume. The goats smell like goats. The chickens smell like chickens. And dogs? Dogs smell like dogs who have been rolling in everything the street has to offer. You find yourself wondering, what do I smell like? Probably like wool, sweat, and a tiny hint of panic. You try to fix it with the medieval version of a deodorant. A small bunch of herbs that someone hands you, which you tuck into your tunic. It helps for about 5 minutes. Then the herbs just smell like herbs and sweat. By midday your nose gives up. It just stops trying. The smell becomes background noise. You can't tell if this is survival or defeat. That evening you try a little experiment. You decide to wash. Not a full bath, you don't have the resources for that, but you heat up a pot of water over the fire, dip a cloth in it, and start wiping yourself down. The water in the pot turns brown very fast. You stare at it, horrified. You think, that was all on me? And then you realize that even after you're done, you don't feel much cleaner. You smell like warm wool now, which is only a slight upgrade. But there's something strangely comforting about it. Everyone else is just as bad. There's no pressure to smell like a meadow. Later that night, as you lie down on your straw bed again, you think about how modern life has trained you to notice things like deodorant, laundry detergent, shampoo. Here. Those things don't exist. People simply live with the smell. It's the smell of survival. It's the smell of a world where water is precious, wood is scarce, and life is too hard to waste time worrying about whether you smell nice. By the time you close your eyes, the scent of smoke and wool and bodies has woven itself into the very air you breathe. Tomorrow you'll wake up and you won't even think about it. And that's how the Middle Ages wins. Eventually you stop noticing that everyone, including you, just smells. Your head has been hurting since yesterday afternoon. It started as a slow throb behind your eyes, the kind of ache you'd normally treat with a glass of water and a nap. But here in medieval Europe, there is no glass of clean water, and there is certainly no quiet place to nap. By morning, the ache has blossomed into a full-blown pounding. You're dizzy, your stomach turns over at the smell of the smoky room, and you decide you need help. Maybe this is just dehydration. Maybe it's something worse. You don't know. What you do know is this: you need a doctor. You stand up and ask the family you're staying with where to find one. They glance at each other and say, "Go find the barber surgeon in town." Wait, barber? Surgeon? In the same sentence? You take a slow walk to the larger town nearby, trying not to trip over mud or chickens, and your head keeps pounding the whole way. The streets here are busier, but you manage to spot a wooden sign hanging above a door. It has a picture of a blood-red stripe on it. That's your clue, the barber surgeon's pole. You push open the door and immediately notice the smell. A mix of old blood, metal tools, and whatever herbs are hanging from the rafters. Inside, a man is sharpening a blade. He looks up at you with a calm expression, as though this is a perfectly normal place to come for healing. And in this time it is. In medieval Europe, medicine is a complicated word. The person you're standing in front of is not what you'd think of as a doctor today. Universities do train physicians, yes, but most of those doctors work for kings, bishops, or very rich merchants. Regular people like you? You see, the barber surgeon. Here's the thing. Barber surgeons are a mix of three professions. Barbers, they cut hair. Surgeons, they cut people. And sometimes dentists, they pull teeth. They do a bit of everything because the boundary between cutting hair and cutting open a wound is apparently quite flexible here. You explain your symptoms. Headache, dizziness, stomach churning. He nods and says, "We'll balance your humors." Humors? You vaguely remember that medieval medicine revolves around four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The idea is that if any of these are out of balance, you get sick. How do they fix it? By trying to get rid of the extra humor. Which brings us to bloodletting. The barber surgeon takes out a thin metal rod and a sharp knife. He gestures for you to sit. You hesitate. Very much. He explains, in a tone that makes you feel like you're being a coward, that he's going to open a vein and let out some blood to release the bad humors. And you realize something. The treatment might be worse than the disease. Still, what choice do you have? Aspirin doesn't exist. There's no pharmacy with neat shelves and friendly advice. You sit down. He ties a piece of cloth around your arm, wipes the skin, not with alcohol, just with his hand, and with a quick slice, blood starts to flow into a bowl. You watch, horrified, as your lifeblood pours out. After a few minutes, he decides you've lost enough and ties the wound with a strip of rough linen. You're lightheaded. Whether from the headache or from losing a pint of blood, it's hard to tell. And here's a strange medieval fact. Sometimes they use leeches instead. **** leech therapy is considered gentler. You put a few leeches on the skin and let them do the work. ***, it's both less dramatic and more unnerving. The barber surgeon looks pleased with himself. That should help, he says. You don't feel helped. You feel worse. But maybe he's not done. He moves to his shelf of remedies. This is where medieval medicine starts to feel like an experiment. The shelves are filled with jars of dried herbs, powders, and substances with names you can't pronounce. You ask what he's thinking. Willow bark tea, he says first, and that sounds reasonable. Willow bark does have salicin in it, which is related to aspirin. But he's also considering some powdered frog and a little mercury, because it draws out the illness. You do not like where this is going. This is how medicine works here. There's a lot of guesswork, a lot of tradition, and very little understanding of what's really happening. Sometimes they use herbs that genuinely help. Other times they prescribe things like crushed emeralds or powdered skull, which don't help at all. And sometimes their treatments actively harm you. Mercury and lead-based ointments? Poisonous. But to be fair, this barber surgeon isn't a fool. He just doesn't have the tools or knowledge you take for granted. Germs haven't been discovered yet. He has no idea that tiny bacteria and viruses are the real enemy. So he goes with what he knows: rebalancing humors, herbal concoctions, and a prayer to Saint Roch or Saint Sebastian for good measure. After your bloodletting, he gives you a cup of a brownish-green liquid that smells strongly of mint and something earthy. You drink it because at this point, what else can you do? It's bitter but not terrible. And for a moment you think maybe this is fine. Then he suggests purging. Purge what? You ask, instantly suspicious. Your system, he says cheerfully. Which means either making you vomit or giving you something that will have you sprinting to the nearest bush. The idea is to clear out all the bad stuff inside you. You politely decline. He shrugs. It's your choice. On your way out, you notice a small table with an assortment of sharp tools. Knives, saws, and hooks. You stop and stare. Do you do surgery? You ask. Yes, he says simply. I remove arrowheads, boil wounds, amputate when necessary. No anesthesia. No antiseptic. If you need something cut off, they hold you down and you bite a stick. You imagine what that must be like and feel faint. As you leave, still dizzy and now with a bandaged arm, you pass an old woman selling little pouches of herbs. She tells you that she's a healer too. In fact, healing is not just the job of barber surgeons. There are herbalists, wise women, monks, and midwives who all know their own versions of medicine. In some cases, these people know more about plants than the men with knives. Monasteries, for instance, often have gardens full of medicinal herbs: sage, thyme, chamomile. If you happen to be near one, you might be treated with something gentler. But there's a catch. These remedies can be mixed with religious rituals. Sometimes a prayer is as important as the plant. You hear one monk tell someone, "This salve will heal your wounds, but also, say this psalm 3 times." In an odd way, it's comforting. You're not sure the science works, but the care is real. And here's a small academic fun fact. Historians still argue about whether medieval medicine was completely useless or surprisingly practical. Some treatments, like honey for wounds, genuinely worked. Others were disasters. After leaving the barber surgeon's shop, you sit in the sun for a while, just to recover from the dizziness. You press on the bandage. The bleeding has stopped, but your arm feels weak. And then, slowly, your headache eases. Maybe it's because you're outside. Maybe it's the willow bark. Maybe you just needed to sit down. But you can't shake the thought. In this world, going to the doctor could very easily make you worse. By evening, as you limp back home, you make yourself a promise. Next time you get a headache, you're sticking to lying quietly in bed. Because here in medieval Europe, medicine is a gamble. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you lose. And sometimes the cure really is worse than the disease. You thought that maybe, just maybe, blending into a crowd would finally feel safe. After all, there's a certain comfort in numbers, right? If you're surrounded by people, you imagine there's some invisible shield. Trouble might happen, but it'll happen to someone else. So today you head to the market square, looking forward to a change of pace. The air here has a faintly sweeter scent than the streets you've been trudging through. It smells of fresh bread, honey cakes, and the unmistakable tang of live animals being sold. But if you squint, you can see something else in the air: tension. The medieval marketplace is chaos with a thin layer of order on top. At first glance, you see color and life: baskets of apples, bolts of dyed cloth, fish laid out on wooden tables. People are shouting, but they're shouting prices, or at least that's what you think at first. A boy tugs at your sleeve and tries to sell you a pouch of nuts. Someone else is calling out, "Fresh bread. Still warm." For a few minutes, it almost feels like one of those pleasant historical reenactments you've seen back home. Except this is not a controlled festival. This is real. And reality comes with a twist. There's no guarantee of safety here. You notice it when two men start yelling at each other over a spot at the well. One is insisting he was there first, the other is arguing about whose bucket was placed closer. Voices rise. People stop to watch. You step back, expecting someone, anyone, to come and calm things down. Maybe a town watchman? Maybe the local sheriff? Nobody comes. Instead, the argument grows. One man shoves the other. The second one shoves back harder. Within seconds, there's a full-on scuffle, the kind where elbows fly and buckets get kicked over. The crowd reacts fast, but not the way you expect. Instead of pulling them apart, half of the people just cheer like this is free entertainment. The other half edge away so they don't get caught in the mess. You quickly learn the first lesson. The marketplace is not a safe zone. It's a stage. And sometimes fights are part of the show. The local authorities, if they exist, are nowhere nearby. Law enforcement in this time is not about constant patrols. It's slow. It's after the fact. Someone will take note of what happened today, maybe, but in the moment, you're on your own. And there's another detail you start to notice. Weapons. Not swords, not unless you're looking at a knight. But knives? Everyone has a knife. It's a tool for eating, cutting rope, chopping herbs. But in a fight, a knife turns into a weapon fast. A few stalls over, a vendor selling onions suddenly swings his knife like he's trying to keep a drunk customer from tipping over his table. It works, but you realize just how quickly these everyday tools can change the mood. There's no police line, no fence. It's just you and the crowd. And the crowd has moods. It moves like a tide. One moment you're looking at a barrel of apples. The next, a commotion surges behind you, and before you know it, you're being swept along by a wave of people running to see what's happening. You try to hold your ground, but the press of bodies is too strong. People are shorter here than you expected, but they're sturdy. And none of them care if they bump you out of the way. When you finally break free of the surge, your tunic is twisted, your shoes are caked in more mud, and you're missing a bit of dignity. And that's when you remember, pickpockets love markets. You check your belt pouch. Thankfully, you don't have much to steal, but it doesn't stop the paranoia. In a city like London or Paris, guild regulations, market officials, and sometimes constables will try to keep things orderly. But out here in a smaller town, the market is self-policing. And that's another way of saying it's not policed at all. Here's a piece of trivia you might appreciate. In some places, there really are town criers and beadles whose job is to enforce market rules. They make sure weights and measures are fair, that bread is the right size for the price. But they're not bodyguards. They won't stop someone from punching you. And medieval punishments? They come later. If you get caught stealing, you might end up in the stocks or fined. But in the moment, it's mob justice. While you're processing all this, something else catches your eye. A cockfight. You hear the sound before you see it, the sharp, frantic flapping and the circle of people shouting encouragement. Inside the ring, two roosters are locked in a fight. People are betting, coins clinking between hands. It's brutal, but everyone's cheering like it's a festival. And suddenly, that tension in the air makes sense. Entertainment here often teeters on the edge of violence, and the crowd likes it that way. You edge away from the circle, only to nearly bump into a man carrying a live goose under his arm. He scowls at you. You apologize. He grunts. You realize again how much you stick out. Even as you're trying to stay invisible, the market pulls you in with its sensory overload. There's so much to see, smell, and hear that it's hard to focus. Brightly colored fabrics hanging from a stall, red and blue and green. A woman selling honeycomb, sticky and golden in the sunlight. A boy balancing a tray of pies on his head, shouting the price in a high-pitched voice. All of it is beautiful in its way. But under it all, there's a threat of danger. Every so often, someone yells, "Thief!" and the whole market turns into a chase scene. People dart between stalls, knocking over baskets. The thief usually disappears into the crowd. Another thing you notice, no one here worries about insurance. Something gets broken, it's broken. If someone runs off with your apples, that's life. And if you try to complain, you'll be told to watch your own goods more carefully. The market is also a place where grudges are aired in public. Old arguments over property, family disputes, even political disagreements, all of it can spill out here. Sometimes the fighting stays verbal, sometimes it doesn't. A group of people near a cart of salted fish are debating taxes loudly. A man in a ragged tunic spits on the ground to make a point. The vendor rolls his eyes. You think for a moment that they're going to come to blows, but then they both laugh and slap each other's backs. You exhale. 2 stalls over, though, it's a different story. Someone accuses someone else of selling bad meat, and this time there's no laughter. A shove, a swing, a brawl. Again, no one stops it. You start to realize that the medieval idea of justice doesn't work the way you expect. There are laws, yes. Kings and lords issue decrees. Towns have rules. But enforcement? It's selective. It depends on who you are, who you know, and how rich you might be. And for someone like you, a stranger with no status, there's not much protection. So you develop a new strategy: blend in, keep your head down, and stay out of the way. That means you walk carefully, don't make eye contact with angry people, and never, ever stand too close to a brewing argument. In the middle of the square, you spot a man with a lute singing a song about Robin Hood. It's cheerful, and for a moment, everyone seems calmer. People gather around, listening. You allow yourself to enjoy the music just for a few breaths. Then a fight breaks out again, this time over a spilled basket of plums. You step away. By late afternoon, the market starts to thin. People pack up their goods. You head back, exhausted, not from shopping but from surviving. It's strange. You came here thinking a crowd would be safe. Instead, you discovered that a medieval crowd is its own kind of danger. Unpredictable, volatile, and almost entirely beyond the reach of the law. As you make your way back along the muddy road, you glance over your shoulder. Even from a distance, you can hear the market's last arguments of the day. And you promise yourself, tomorrow you're going to think very carefully before joining a crowd again. Because here, safety in numbers doesn't mean what you think it does. After a long day of dodging mud, markets, and the smell of everything that isn't soap, Your stomach decides it has had enough of this survival mode. It growls loudly, a sound so embarrassing that even the chickens scatter a little. You realize something. You need a proper meal. Not just a piece of rock-hard bread, not a mug of lukewarm ale that tastes like sour apple soup. You want a real dinner. So when someone mentions that the local tavern has food fresh off the fire, you can practically hear angels singing. Finally, you think, a break. Maybe there'll be stew or something warm and filling. The tavern is a low building with a wooden door that squeaks as you push it open. Inside, the air is thick, smoky from the central hearth, rich with a dozen overlapping smells. Wood, beer, something sweet, and is that cabbage? Probably. Wooden tables are crammed close together. A few benches wobble on uneven floors. People sit elbow to elbow, talking loud enough to compete with the clatter of mugs. The innkeeper gives you a once-over, shrugs and gestures toward a bench. You slide in, careful not to bump anyone, and glance at the menu. There isn't a menu actually. There's a single big pot of something bubbling over the fire, and whatever that something is, that's your dinner. You wait until a wooden bowl is slapped down in front of you, along with a hunk of bread. You look into the bowl. It's stew. That's the good news. The less good news? You have absolutely no idea what's in it. Steam rises, carrying the scent of boiled root vegetables, a hint of meat, and a spice that you can't identify. You pick up the spoon, more like a piece of carved wood that vaguely resembles a spoon, and take your first bite. Fine. Sort of. The stew tastes heavy and a bit sour. The bread, meanwhile, is tough enough that you could probably defend yourself with it. But you're too hungry to be picky. For a few minutes, everything is wonderful. Warm food, a full stomach, the kind of comfort you've been craving for days. And then you notice the aftertaste. It's faint at first, like something just a little off. You try another spoonful. Same thing. Something in the stew tastes like it's been sitting around too long. And then it hits you, medieval food safety is not a thing. In a world without refrigeration, without expiration dates, and without much understanding of bacteria, food here is a gamble. You're not just eating, you're rolling the dice. The meat in this stew? It could be fresh. It could also be from an animal that died yesterday. Maybe 2 days ago. You don't ask. You probably don't want to know. And here's something to keep in mind. Even the bread isn't safe. You look down at yours and notice little green flecks on the crust. Well, it happens all the time because bread here is dense, dark, and stored in damp places. Do people eat around it? Yes. Does anyone throw it away? No. Food is too precious to waste. You scrape off what you can and try to ignore it. Sometimes, mold in medieval bread contains ergot, a fungus that can cause hallucinations, convulsions, or, if you eat enough, death. Some historians believe that strange outbreaks of dancing madness in the Middle Ages were linked to ergot poisoning. So that bread in your hand? It might just come with a surprise side effect. Visions? You take another look at the stew and spot a small chunk of meat that looks gray. You push it to the side. The smell of spices is strong and you realize something else. Spices here aren't just for flavor, they're for disguise. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves are luxury items brought from faraway places. When people use them, it's often to cover the taste of meat that's past its prime. You ask the innkeeper about the seasoning. Special mix, he says proudly. Translation: whatever was in the cupboard that could make this stew taste less questionable. At another table, a man bites into a sausage that crunches in a way sausage definitely shouldn't crunch. You hear him say, "Bit of bone," like it's no big deal. You're not sure if you're horrified or impressed. And here's the fun thing about medieval dining. There's very little separation between humans and animals. Cats wander between tables looking for scraps. A chicken struts confidently across the floor. You wonder if the chicken is on the menu or if it's just visiting. You're trying to focus on your bowl when you notice a drunk man stumble into another table, tipping over someone else's ale. Ale spills everywhere, soaking into the wooden planks. Instead of an apology, there's shouting. You instinctively brace for another fight. After the market, you're half expecting it. But this time it fizzles out. The spilled ale is just scooped up with a rag, the drunk man plops back into his seat and life goes on. The ale, by the way, is your only drink option. Water is too dangerous to serve, so everyone drinks beer, wine, or cider. Even children. It's low in alcohol, but it tastes slightly sour, like someone forgot to finish brewing. You raise your mug, take a sip, and try not to grimace. The tavern has a certain atmosphere, though, one you can't help but notice. It's loud and warm and chaotic, but also social. People here share food and conversation with strangers as though everyone's part of the same family. And table manners? Forget everything you know. There are no forks. Everyone eats with a spoon, a knife, or their hands. You watch someone tear off a chunk of bread and use it to scoop stew like a medieval edible spoon. It's practical, you'll give them that. Plates are rare. Sometimes the plate is just a square of stale bread called a trencher. You pile food on top of it, and after the meal, the trencher, now soggy and flavored, might be eaten, fed to animals, or given to the poor. As you eat, you overhear a man talking about a wedding feast last week. Apparently, it was fancy enough to serve pies shaped like castles with whole birds baked inside them. The trick is that when you cut into the pie, live birds fly out. You can't decide if that's impressive or slightly terrifying. There's also a rumor about jellied fish that someone had to cut with a sword because it was so tough. The longer you sit in this tavern, the more you understand how food works here. It's survival first, enjoyment second. And the risks are part of the package. You remember hearing something about table salt being a sign of wealth. The farther you sit from the salt at a noble table, the lower your status. Here. There's a communal salt dish that everyone dips into with their hands. That's fine, you tell yourself, and try not to think about it. By the time you finish the bowl, you're full but also a little uneasy. Not because of the taste, but because of the lurking thought in your head. Was any of that safe? Night falls as you leave the tavern. You step outside into the cool air, patting your stomach like you've just made a small gamble with fate. As you make your way back to the house, your mind starts cataloging every possible consequence of that meal. Will you get sick? Will you hallucinate? Or will you be fine? There's no way to know. Medieval meals are an adventure, every single time. And the funny part? You already know you'll be back tomorrow. Because no matter how questionable the stew might be, a warm meal is still better than chewing on dry bread that tastes like history and regret. Here in medieval Europe, every dinner is a little bit of danger served in a wooden bowl. You wake up the next morning thinking, maybe today I'll be useful. After all, you've been drifting through medieval Europe like a confused tourist, bumping into markets and taverns in trouble. Maybe now's the time to roll up your sleeves and do something productive. The idea sounds great in your head. You picture yourself helping someone in a cozy bakery, maybe weaving baskets in the shade, or just sweeping a floor while people smile and thank you. But the reality? The reality hits you the moment you ask the family you've been staying with if there's any work you can do. They laugh. It's not a cruel laugh, just the sort of laugh people give to someone who clearly doesn't know what they're asking. Work, the farmer says, is everywhere. You just start doing it. You stop when it's dark. Or when you can't stand anymore. That's your first clue. In your world, work comes with contracts, schedules, coffee breaks, ergonomic chairs. In this world, work is survival. And it never ends. You decide to join the farmer in his fields. It sounds simple enough. You imagine a stroll among neat rows of crops, maybe pulling up a weed or two. Then you actually step into the field. The first thing you notice is how rough the ground is. It's not flat. It's uneven, full of clumps and rocks that catch at your shoes. The second thing you notice is the tool in your hands, a wooden hoe that looks like it has already been through several generations. The handle is smooth from years of use, but it's heavy. And then you start. Weeding sounds simple, right? Except these weeds have deep roots. Every swing of the hoe feels like you're trying to pull up the earth itself. Within 10 minutes, your shoulders burn. After 20, your back joins in. There's no music, no podcast, no distraction. Just you, the dirt, and the constant bending and swinging. And the sun. Oh, the sun. In your modern life, you probably think of the sun as nice. Here it's just relentless. Your clothes stick to your skin. Sweat runs down your face and every gust of wind just blows dust into your eyes. By midday, you're dreaming of shade. The farmer sees you pause and chuckles. Tired? He asks. You nod. He shrugs. We keep going. Because here's the truth, There's no lunchtime in the way you know it. People eat a little when there's time. Otherwise you just work. And this is just a regular day. Harvest season is even worse. From dawn to dusk, people scythe, bundle, and carry heavy sheaves of grain. Historians sometimes talk about harvest fatigue, but you don't need a book to understand it. You can feel it in your arms already. To be fair, medieval workers do take breaks, but they're small, irregular, and tied to the work. People pause to drink ale because the water isn't safe, or to eat a crust of bread. But there's no official weekend. The closest thing to a day off is a feast day, a church holiday. Depending on where you are and the local customs, there can be a surprising number of them. Some years people get dozens of these days. But that doesn't mean the work goes away. It just piles up until the feast is over. You decide maybe farming isn't for you. So you ask around about working in town. Someone points you toward a blacksmith. You think, perfect, I'll try something different. Inside the smithy, the heat is even worse than the sun outside. The forge roars like a dragon, and the air smells like hot iron and sweat. The smith hands you a bellows and tells you to keep the fire alive. You think this is easy until about 2 minutes in, when you realize that pumping a bellows is like operating a stubborn accordion that weighs more than a sack of stones. Then he asks you to hold the tongs while he hammers. Sparks fly. They land on your sleeve. You yelp. He laughs. Every single strike of his hammer shakes your bones. The sound is deafening. And the smell, burning metal, sweat, smoke, sticks in your nose. You leave the smithy after an hour feeling like your arms have turned into noodles. Fine, you think maybe something indoors. Something gentle. You meet a group of women spinning wool. The sound of the spinning wheel is rhythmic, almost calming. But as soon as you try it, you discover that it takes both skill and stamina. Your feet keep the wheel turning, your hands draw out the fibers, and the result is supposed to be a smooth, even thread. Yours looks like a knotted snake. Everyone laughs kindly, but you notice how fast they work, how the wheel never stops turning. And once the spinning is done, the weaving begins. Hours of threading yarn back and forth on a loom, beating it into place and starting again. It's repetitive, yes, but it's also demanding. By the end of the day, your shoulders ache just as much as they did in the field. One thing that shocks you is how young some of the workers are. Children work too. Little kids herd geese, scare birds away from crops, carry buckets of water, collect firewood. By the time they're 10, they're doing adult work. There's no wait until you're grown up. Life here doesn't wait for you. Another surprise, when the workday is done, there's still work. You come back to the house thinking you can collapse, but there are chores waiting. Grinding grain, tending to animals, mending clothes. You try to help with the grindstone, turning the heavy wheel that crushes grains into flour. After a few minutes, your arms are trembling again. Then someone hands you a pile of vegetables to chop. The knife is dull and the chopping block is uneven. Every cut feels like a battle. There's no such thing as after work here. There's just until it's dark. What really gets to you isn't just the physical tiredness. It's the mental part. Back home, if you work hard, you know there's a paycheck at the end of the week. You know you can stop at a set hour. You know that if you quit, there are other options. Here, none of that exists. If you don't work, you don't eat. It's that simple. And if the weather ruins the crops, or the Lord raises taxes, or a sickness sweeps through town, it doesn't matter how hard you worked, you can still end up with nothing. The margin for survival is razor thin. In larger towns, there are guilds, associations of skilled workers like bakers, butchers, carpenters. Guilds give you some security, but only if you've trained for years as an apprentice. And as an apprentice, you're basically living with your master, doing chores for years before you even touch the real work. So unless you've been born into it, this door is closed to you. The only time you really notice a break is on a holy day. Then the bells ring and everyone gathers at the church. It's a pause, a collective sigh. But the moment it's over, people pick up their tools again. By the end of the first full day of work, your body feels like it belongs to someone else. Your hands are blistered. Your shoulders ache. Your back is stiff. And you realize that this isn't even an unusually hard day. This is just life. You lie down on your straw mattress that night, staring up at the wooden beams and try to process it. This world runs on muscle, not machines. Every loaf of bread, every plank of wood, every bolt of cloth, it all comes from someone putting in hours of sweat. And the people here don't complain, not really. They're too busy working. That's the biggest difference of all. You've spent one day doing what they do every day, and you barely survived. Tomorrow you'll try again. But deep down you're starting to suspect that in medieval Europe, there is no trying. There's just work till you drop. When the day finally ends, and let's be honest, it feels like it lasted about 6 years, you look forward to one thing: sleep. That's it. You don't need luxury. You don't need a hot shower, which, let's face it, doesn't exist here. You don't even need a soft mattress. You just need somewhere to collapse, close your eyes, and forget for a few hours that you've spent the day dodging chaos, moldy bread, and an unreasonably angry goose. So when the family you're staying with points you toward a room, you feel a little relief. A private space. Perfect. Except the room isn't really a room. It's more like a closet with dreams of being a room someday. You duck through a doorway so low you have to fold yourself like a piece of paper, and the first thing you notice is how close everything feels. The walls lean in at odd angles. There's a single small window that looks like someone punched a hole in the wood and decided, yep, that's enough light. It doesn't close completely, so the cold night air slides right in. The bed? Well, bed is a generous word. It's a wooden frame with a sack stuffed with straw. If you were hoping for a pillow, think again. You get a folded cloak. At least you have a blanket, or rather, something blanket-shaped. It smells faintly of sheep. But the room is yours for tonight. You let out a long breath and sit on the edge of the bed. Dust rises around you like it's trying to escape too. And then you hear it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. You freeze. It's not the wind. It's not your imagination. It's something alive. You hold your breath and listen again. The sound is coming from the corner under the bed. Then it moves to the wall. Then, horrifyingly, you hear a faint squeak. Rats. You knew medieval Europe had rats, but somehow, a part of you thought they would politely stay outside. No, they live here too. You lean over very slowly and peek under the bed. 2 beady eyes stare back at you. Then another pair. And another. It's a rat conference. You yank your head back up so fast you hit it on the wall. The scratching continues. It's less 1 or 2 rats and more. This entire house is a rat apartment complex, and you're the one paying rent. Here's a fun, and by fun I mean slightly horrifying, fact. Rats love medieval towns. They have everything a rat dreams of: food scraps, warm hiding places, and people who aren't exactly experts in waste management. Most houses have no proper floor, just packed earth, or wooden planks with gaps. Perfect for a rat commute. And remember that open window? That's not a bug. It's a feature. No glass, just shutters that don't fit properly. Easy entry. You start to understand why people in this time store food in hanging baskets. You decide maybe you can just lie down and pretend the rats aren't there. So you settle into bed. Immediately, you discover a whole new set of problems. The straw mattress is lumpy and the straw itself is sharp. It pokes through the thin cloth and scratches at your legs. You shift. It crunches. You shift again. Crunch. After a few minutes, you find a position that feels semi-okay. And then you notice the smell. The straw isn't fresh. It smells like old hay and, if you're honest, a little like old animal. You try not to think about it. In wealthier houses, mattresses are stuffed with feathers, which sounds lovely, but featherbeds come with their own issue: fleas. Whole colonies of fleas. So tonight, straw it is. Here's something historians still debate. Did medieval people actually sleep sitting up? Some sources suggest that people often slept propped up on pillows or bolsters, partly because they were worried about bad vapors sinking into their lungs if they lay flat. Looking at this bed, though, you're convinced it's less about vapors and more about the fact that lying down fully means rolling into a wall. Just as you start to drift off, the rats decide it's time for a party. You hear them squeaking, running along the beams overhead, and every so often, there's a sound that can only be described as rat gymnastics. At one point, something drops from the rafters onto the floor. You sit up, heart racing, but it's just a piece of straw. Probably. Outside the window, a dog barks. Someone yells. A baby cries. This little town doesn't really have quiet hours. Life continues whether you want to sleep or not. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the air in this room is a strange mix of smoke, unwashed fabric, and something faintly sour. Remember, there's no running water. There's no laundry detergent. Clothes get aired out, but that's about it. Even your blanket smells like everyone who's ever used it before. Around midnight, you finally feel yourself sinking into something like sleep. That's when you feel something brush across your foot. You sit up so fast you nearly flip the mattress. You grab your cloak and shake it out like your life depends on it. The rat stares at you for a long, bold second, then trots back into the shadows as though you're the one being rude. And the worst part? You can't even be mad. Because, in a way, this is their house. You're just borrowing it. Even without the rats, there's a constant low-level itch that you can't ignore. Fleas, lice, bedbugs. These are your new reality. You try to convince yourself it's just straw poking you, but deep down, you know better. Medieval people combed their hair with little fine-toothed combs to catch lice, but that's as much as they can do. There's no shampoo, no bug spray. And here's something else. Privacy is a luxury. In many houses, there aren't even separate rooms. People share beds. Whole families sleep in the same space. In some inns, you pay for a spot in a bed, not for your own bed. You could end up sleeping next to a stranger. Tonight, at least, you've got the room to yourself. Well, apart from the rats. You wonder how anyone manages to get a full night's sleep here. And then you realize they're just used to it. The noises, the smells, the cramped spaces, they've grown up with it. For them, this is normal. For you, it's a crash course in just how soft your life back home really is. Sometime in the very early morning, the first gray light starts to seep in through the small window. The scratching and squeaking fade as the rats retreat to whatever hidden tunnels they call home. You sit up, bleary-eyed, feeling like you didn't sleep at all. Your back hurts from the mattress. Your feet are dirty from the floor. Your patience is thin. But you survive the night. You stand up, stretch, and look around the room one last time. It's not much. 4 walls, a bed, and a swarm of uninvited roommates. And yet, you realize this is better than nothing. Plenty of people sleep on the floor by the fire or under the stars. You even start to feel a strange fondness for the little space, rats and all. Because here, a tiny room is still a shelter. You duck through the door again and step back into the main room of the house. The morning fire is already crackling. Someone is stirring a pot. And for a moment, you feel grateful. You may be tired, bitten, and slightly traumatized by rodent society, but you have a roof over your head. And in medieval Europe, that counts as a good night. Morning breaks, but you don't feel any fresher. The aches from yesterday's labor still cling stubbornly to your muscles, and the memory of the rat's midnight antics makes your skin crawl every time you try to relax. But as you step outside into the cold morning air, your mind starts wrestling with a new kind of challenge, one less tangible than mud or muscle. The world you live in is ruled not just by kings or weather, but by beliefs. Invisible rules and ancient fears seem to hang in the air as thickly as the morning fog. You had thought that surviving here meant mastering the basics, finding food, avoiding sickness, getting through the relentless chores. But you're beginning to realize the truth is more complicated. The people around you move with a careful rhythm dictated by an unseen power. It's not just tradition or custom. It's something deeper, something that touches every word spoken, every glance exchanged, every step taken. The first reminder comes with the church bell, a deep, solemn tone that rolls over the village like a giant's slow breath. Its sound reverberates through the streets, halting work mid-swing, silencing conversations, and prompting devout crosses and bowed heads. In this world, the bell isn't just a timekeeper. It's law, it's order, it's a command. It tells people when to pray, when to eat, when to stop and reflect. Without a clock, without a calendar pinned to a wall, this single sound orchestrates the entire village's day. You watch as the townsfolk, young and old alike, snap to attention when the bell tolls. The priest, who seems to embody the church itself, presides not only over sacred ceremonies but also over the invisible currents that control daily life. You start to feel the weight of his gaze even when he's not around, like an unseen presence reminding everyone that their lives are under scrutiny. One afternoon, as you carry a heavy bucket from the well, you let slip a joke, a half-hearted quip about how muddy and disorderly the last holy procession looked. Immediately, the woman beside you stiffens, her eyes narrowing. "Don't say things like that," she whispers fiercely. "Not where people can hear." You freeze, suddenly aware that you might have stepped on a hidden mine. "Why not?" you ask, hoping for a gentle answer. Instead, she glances around nervously and lowers her voice to a secretive hush. Words can be dangerous. The wrong words can bring trouble, not just for you but for your whole family. For the entire village. That moment reveals a truth you hadn't fully grasped. In this place, faith is not merely a private comfort or personal choice. It is the backbone of society, woven into laws, customs, and everyday decisions. What you say or don't say can ripple out like a stone thrown into a pond, stirring up consequences far beyond your control. As you wander through the streets, your eyes open wider to the omnipresence of religion. Crosses are carved into door frames, weathered paintings of saints adorn humble walls, and small wooden shrines peek out from unexpected corners. Every house, every market stall, every field is infused with a sacred atmosphere, a constant reminder that the church does not simply occupy a building, it occupies the very minds and hearts of the people. One villager tells you about a nearby church that holds a bone from a saint's finger. Pilgrims travel for miles just to glimpse this holy relic, believing it has the power to heal, bless, or even protect. It's not a rare practice. Relics are everywhere. Fragments of bones, tattered scraps of clothing, splinters from the cross itself. People believe that touching or even being near these objects can change their fortunes. The thought of walking half a country just to see a tiny dusty piece of a saint is almost comical to you, but for them, faith is tangible, as real as the mud sticking to your boots. Alongside this deep religious conviction runs a thread of superstition and fear of the supernatural. You notice how neighbors quietly eye each other when something goes wrong. A sick cow, a failed crop, an unexplained death, and whisper about curses and dark magic. Charm bags hang from doors, bundles of herbs are tied to beams, and whispered prayers fill the air as the wind shifts direction. One night by the fire, a man casually recounts the tale of a woman from a nearby village accused of witchcraft. His tone is flat and matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather, revealing just how close suspicion and accusation lie beneath everyday life. Though the infamous witch hunts still lie decades away, the seeds of fear and mistrust are already sown deep in the soil of the village. Everyone knows the stories, and everyone understands the risks of falling under suspicion. The church's power to accuse or absolve is immense, and few dare to challenge it. The following day you follow a crowd into the dimly lit church. The cool stone walls seem to absorb the sounds of murmured prayers and rustling robes. Stained glass windows cast pools of colored light that dance across the floor like living paintings. The priest stands at the altar, a figure of calm authority. The villagers kneel, one by one, to confess their sins in the confessional booth or directly before the priest's watchful eyes. Their whispered admissions range from petty gossip and minor thefts to deeper fears of moral failure. When the priest pronounces forgiveness, relief washes over their faces. You realize how much power the church wields by offering absolution, a way to cleanse guilt, to reset the soul. But the church is not merely a source of fear and control. It is also a center of community and celebration. When a holy feast day arrives, the entire village seems to breathe a collective sigh of joy. Work slows, the bells ring more frequently, and people gather for processions, singing hymns that echo through the streets. Long tables appear outdoors, laden with bread, cheese, and ale. Children run freely, laughter bubbles up, and for a few hours the hardships of daily life fade into the background. You feel the pull of belonging in those moments, a sense that the church offers more than rules, it offers connection. A villager invites you to join a pilgrimage to a distant holy site. You ask why anyone would walk for weeks or months to reach a place you've never heard of. For your soul, he answers simply, as if that explains everything. Pilgrimages are spiritual journeys that bind communities, refresh faith, and offer hope for blessings or forgiveness. The thought of leaving behind everything familiar to walk dusty roads with strangers is daunting, but you sense the deep human need that drives such devotion. Yet faith is a double-edged sword. If you fall out of favor with the priest or develop a reputation for speaking unwisely, the consequences can be severe. Punishments range from fines to public humiliation to excommunication, being cast out from the community entirely. In a world where neighbors are lifelines and survival depends on social bonds, exclusion is a fate worse than most physical hardships. You learn quickly to weigh your words carefully. It's not that you don't question or doubt. Inside your mind, you wrestle with contradictions and skepticism, but out loud, you nod, cross yourself, and keep your true thoughts hidden. It's safer that way. Historians still debate how deeply medieval people believed every miracle, every story, and every warning. Was it genuine faith or social habit? Did they truly feel the weight of divine judgment, or were they acting out roles carved by centuries of tradition? You realize that from the perspective of someone trying to get by, the distinction barely matters. Whether by belief or habit, following the rhythm of the church is the only way to avoid trouble. You begin to see the village as overlaid with an invisible map of rules and expectations, guiding every step, word, and gesture. It's a world where invisible boundaries are just as real as stone walls. As night falls, back in your cramped, rat-infested room, the distant tolling of the church bell drifts through the cold air. What once felt oppressive now seems more complex, both a source of order and comfort as well as a cage. Lying in the darkness, you understand that surviving medieval Europe requires more than physical endurance. It demands learning when to speak and when to stay silent. Here, a careless sentence can wield the force of a sword. And sometimes, the greatest dangers come not from the outside world but from your own words. By the time the sun rises the next morning, you're already awake. You don't really sleep here so much as drift in and out of something that barely counts as rest. And as you pull on your rough tunic, step over a chicken that somehow wandered inside, and duck through the crooked doorway, another truth about medieval life begins to hit you. Privacy, the kind you once took for granted, isn't a thing here. Not even a little. You might think that after days of walking through muck, dodging crowds in the market, and sharing the night with rats, the worst part of medieval Europe would be the dirt or the smell. But as the hours tick on, you discover a new form of exhaustion. There is no moment, absolutely no moment, when you are truly alone. The town around you is alive at all hours. The streets hum with voices, hammers strike metal, children shriek, and geese, always geese, announce every little thing as if the world depends on their opinion. And the thing is, there's no escaping it. The walls are thin, the windows are open, and even the quietest of whispers seems to travel. It begins the moment you step into the main room of the house you're staying in. Someone is already there, someone is always there. A woman kneels by the hearth, feeding sticks into the fire, and the warmth and the smell of yesterday's smoke fill your nose before you've even rubbed the sleep out of your eyes. Her toddler is sitting on the floor, playing with a piece of string, staring at you like you're the most exciting thing to happen all morning. In one corner, an older man is sharpening tools, and in another, someone is kneading dough, their elbows moving like a slow drumbeat. They don't pause to acknowledge you because there's no concept of giving someone space in a room. It's just assumed that you will all occupy the same air, move around each other, and keep going. Even when you go outside, you realize that life here is structured around shared existence. People talk to each other constantly, shouting greetings from across the muddy lane, asking questions about the day's work, sharing news without a moment of hesitation. It's a web of human presence that never lets up. And it's not just the streets or the houses. It's everywhere. When you head toward the well, you see a line of people already waiting. You stand there, bucket in hand, and try to let your mind wander, but the woman behind you is quick to lean in with questions. Where are you from? How long are you staying? Do you know the price of cheese at the next market town? It's not meant as an interrogation, it's just life. People here don't see the need for barriers. You try to tell yourself this isn't so bad. After all, community has its benefits. There's always someone to help you carry water, always someone to tell you how to avoid the worst patch of mud, always someone willing to share bread when you've had nothing all day. And yet, as the sun climbs higher, you start to realize just how much your modern mind craves a moment of being unseen. There is none of that here. Even at work, you're never really by yourself. In the fields, there are rows of people bent over in the dirt with you, pulling weeds, planting seeds, harvesting whatever the season gives. When you glance up to straighten your back, you meet another tired face, then another, then another. If you move slowly, everyone sees. If you move quickly, everyone sees that too. It's not judgmental in a cruel way, it's just constant, unbroken awareness. Like living under a spotlight that never turns off. At midday, when the sun beats down so hard it feels like the sky is trying to pin you to the earth, the workers pause. And just as you start thinking about lying under a tree by yourself, the entire group collapses into the same shade together, sharing the same patch of grass. There is no such thing as eating lunch alone. A piece of bread passes around and someone hands you a cup of thin ale. Even your thirst becomes a collective experience. Later, back in town, you think maybe the bathhouse will offer some relief. You've heard of these places, a room full of steam where people wash off the grime of the day. You picture soaking in quiet, the warmth loosening the knots in your shoulders. But when you step inside, you find that it's nothing like the private bathrooms you know. For one, it's packed. Men, women, children, all crammed into one long damp space that smells faintly of wet wood and people. There's no modesty, no curtain to hide behind. Everyone sees everyone and nobody thinks twice about it. If you were hoping to bathe in solitude, you might as well give up now. Even the act of cleaning yourself is a public activity. And you begin to notice that this absence of privacy extends even to what you say. People overhear everything. They comment on everything. A half-whispered remark at the market becomes news at dinner, and by the next day, the baker on the other end of town already knows what you said. It's like the entire community is one giant conversation that never stops, and you, unfortunately, are always invited. When the evening comes, you imagine that at least the bedroom, your little cupboard of a room, will give you some rest. But the thin wooden walls don't keep anything out. You hear every word spoken on the other side, every cough, every laugh. It's like you're lying there with your ear pressed against the world, unable to turn the volume down. In some houses you learn there isn't even a separate room. Families sleep side by side in the same large bed or on straw mats around the hearth. Privacy as a concept doesn't exist. Children grow up with no locked doors, no secret places to retreat to, no idea that being completely alone is even an option. You can't help but think about how differently your own life is structured. Back home, you can walk into your room, shut the door, and create a little world where no one else enters. Here, there's no such escape. There is only the shared world all the time. And yet, as the days pass, you begin to understand that there's another side to this. The constant presence of other people means you're never left to face things alone. When someone falls ill, neighbors gather to help. When a roof caves in, there are hands ready to rebuild. When a cow wanders off, the whole village seems to turn into a search party. The price for that safety is that you yourself are never invisible. You remember one evening at sunset, sitting on the bench outside the house. You try to find a moment where you can hear nothing but the wind, but before long, someone's daughter sits next to you, tugging at your sleeve, asking about the world beyond the next hill. Another boy comes running up, carrying a stick, ready to show you how he can swing it like a sword. And soon enough, a group of adults joins too, filling the air with conversation. It's gentle and ordinary, but it leaves no empty space for you to disappear into. Historians still argue about whether medieval people ever longed for solitude in the way modern people do. Did they miss something they had never known? Or did the constant presence of others feel as natural as breathing? You realize you'll never fully know the answer. What you do know is that the rhythm of their lives leaves little room for isolation. And so, night after night, you lie awake, adjusting to a world where walls are thin, rooms are small, and life is lived out loud in front of everyone. Privacy isn't just rare here, it's non-existent. In a place where nothing belongs solely to you, even your thoughts begin to feel a little crowded. You thought that after learning to live with rats, crowds, and the never-ending noise of other people's lives, nothing else in medieval Europe could surprise you. But then you meet the real boss fight of this world. It isn't a sword, it isn't a bandit, it isn't even bad bread. It's the weather. From the moment you step out of that low, crooked door in the morning, the sky is already glaring at you, as if it has been waiting for this exact opportunity to ruin your day. You stand there for a few seconds looking up, trying to guess what kind of mood it's in today. You know now that weather here isn't just background scenery, it's the loudest, rudest character in the whole village. You start walking down the muddy street and you immediately regret it. Last night's rain hasn't so much soaked into the ground as turned it into a kind of brown glue. Your shoes, if you can call these lumpy things shoes, sink with every step. When you try to pull one foot out, the other foot gets stuck, and before long you're standing there like a fool, wobbling, while a couple of geese watch you with the smug expression of creatures who never get their feet trapped. Even the geese seem to know you're not from here. And this is just the mud after a regular night of drizzle. You don't even want to imagine what happens when the weather decides to get dramatic. Someone told you once that in medieval Europe, there's no such thing as bad weather, only improper clothing. You wish you could track that person down and show them what it's like to be wearing a rough wool tunic that smells like sheep and is about as waterproof as paper. As you head toward the fields to help with the morning work, the dampness has already soaked into your socks, crawled up your legs, and decided to settle permanently in your bones. The chill that comes with it is a kind of slow, patient enemy. It doesn't hurt, it just makes sure you're uncomfortable every single second. And because there's no central heating, no hot shower, and no hair dryer waiting at the end of the day, this cold becomes part of you. By the time you reach the edge of the fields, the sky has started spitting tiny drops of rain again. Not enough to call it a shower, just enough to make sure that the little warmth you had in your fingers completely disappears. It hits your face like pinpricks and you wipe your forehead with the back of your sleeve, but it's useless. Then comes the wind. You thought wind was just moving air. You were wrong. Here, the wind feels like an army that has declared war on everything in sight. It throws itself into your face, tugs at your clothes, sneaks through every gap in the walls, and even when you hunch your shoulders and try to make yourself as small as possible, it finds you. And there's no escape. Fields are open. Streets are open. Houses have cracks. The wind gets everywhere, and it howls as it goes, a sound that somehow makes the world feel bigger and lonelier. Later, as you help someone turn over soil with a wooden spade that looks older than you realize that the wind is not only unpleasant, it changes everything about life. Too much of it and the fields dry out. Too little rain and nothing grows. Too much rain and everything rots. It's almost funny in a bitter way how much weather decides for everyone here. It decides whether there will be food this year, whether the market will be lively, whether the livestock will make it through the winter. When the harvest fails because of storms or frost, nobody gets to say, "Oh well, we'll just run to the store." There is no store. There is only hunger. And of course there's the wet cold that seems to last half the year. You've never been so aware of the concept of damp before. Everything is damp. Your clothes are damp. The straw you sleep on is damp. Your hair never quite dries. Sometimes it feels like your own soul is damp. At night, when the wind is done slapping you around, you curl up in bed and think you've made it through. That's when winter decides to knock on the door. The cold that seeps in through the cracks isn't just a temperature, it's like a presence. It lies on your skin like a heavy hand. You press yourself closer to the person next to you, but even body heat feels like it's being stolen by the icy air. And there's no getting away from it. There are no heaters. Firewood is precious. The fire in the hearth can only do so much when the walls are basically thin, crooked boards. People here go to bed wrapped in as many layers as they own, and still their breath fogs up the air. If you're lucky, you think maybe summer will be better. But summer brings its own torment. When the sun comes, it doesn't just shine, it crushes. The heat in the fields becomes so heavy that the air itself seems to slow down. You try to keep up with the work, but sweat pours into your eyes, the tools grow heavier in your hands, and there's no cold water waiting for you at the end of the row. You can't hide from it. The houses, with their low ceilings and poor ventilation, turn into ovens. And just when you think maybe you could handle the heat, a sudden storm rolls in from nowhere. Medieval weather has no sense of timing. The sky goes black, the rain comes down in sheets, and the roads that were already half mud become full swamps. Thunder shakes the ground, and people hurry to get indoors, pulling animals and carts along with them, while the streets turn into fast-moving rivers of brown water. The next day, everything is wet again. You can't help but notice how everyone here talks about the weather all the time. At first you thought it was just a polite way to start a conversation, but no. It's because the weather is genuinely the most powerful force in their lives. They look at the sky like sailors, always guessing, always worrying. Some even take omens from it. A red sunrise? Trouble. A sudden gust? Maybe God is angry. The line between weather and divine will is blurry, and people explain every storm and every good harvest as a sign of something beyond their control. You overhear an argument one day between two men in the market. One insists that last year's hailstorm was punishment for the town's sins. The other insists it was caused by witches in a neighboring village. Both agree it wasn't just bad luck. People here rarely use the word luck when the sky is involved. There's a grim kind of acceptance that comes with all this. You see it in their faces when rain starts during a festival, or when frost kills a row of seedlings. There's frustration, yes, but also a shrug as if to say, what else is new? It's as if the weather has been bossing them around for so long that nobody even remembers what it's like to be free from it. You, on the other hand, have not built up that level of tolerance. After weeks of living like this, you are exhausted by the sky. You are tired of guessing whether tomorrow will bring mud or dust, fog or hail. You are tired of walking into the wind like it's a physical wall. You are tired of waking up damp and going to bed damp and never feeling the kind of dry warmth that used to be so simple. Historians argue about whether medieval people complained as much about the weather as we do now, or whether they just accepted it as the background music of life. It's hard to tell. There aren't many letters that say, "Dear cousin, I'm so very tired of this rain," but when you look at the poems, the songs, the carvings, they talk about storms and winds and frosts a lot. You think they probably complained plenty. They just did it while trudging through the mud. One evening, as another storm rolls in and you squeeze yourself onto the bench near the fire, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, you realize something important. Here, weather is not just the backdrop. It's the stage director. It decides what happens and everyone else just tries to keep up. You pull your blanket tighter and close your eyes, hoping that, just maybe, tomorrow the sky will wake up in a better mood. By the time the sun sinks low enough to stain the sky in streaks of orange and muddy gray, your whole body feels like it's been through a lifetime. You've survived. Well, survived is a strong word. You've endured one day. And in that moment, it finally hits you. No amount of optimism, no amount of cheerfully saying, "I can adapt," prepares you for the absolute fact that this is not your world. Not even close. The day began with mud between your toes and bread so hard it could probably be classified as a weapon. You thought you were tough. You thought you could handle the slow pace, the rustic charm, maybe even the lack of coffee. But as the hours stretched on, each part of medieval life took its turn introducing itself like an overly enthusiastic host who doesn't understand boundaries. And now, as you stand in the fading light, you realize you have been weighed, measured, and found completely, hilariously wanting. You try to list it all out just to make sense of why you feel like every cell in your body is crying out for a time machine. The food? Barely edible. The work? Endless. The air? A constant swirl of smoke, mud, and things you don't even want to identify. And that little thing called personal space? Forget it. The moment you step out of a building, there's someone next to you. Even when you close your eyes, the sounds of people, snoring, talking, shouting, follow you into your dreams. And yet, there's something deeper than all those inconveniences. What finally crushes you is the slow dawning understanding that there is no break here. There is no timeout button, no, I'll take a nap and scroll my phone for 15 minutes and reset. There's just the next task and the next and the next until the sun disappears and you collapse somewhere flat and vaguely clean, hoping no rats decide to say hello. As twilight creeps in, you walk through the town one last time. It's busier than you expect. People aren't retreating into their homes. They're outside, talking, trading, finishing their work by torchlight. There's an odd kind of energy in the air, but instead of lifting you up, it makes you realize how little you belong. They move like fish in a stream, flowing around each other effortlessly, while you stumble over every bump, every rut in the road. You pass by a stall where a woman is still selling whatever is left over from the day. The bread looks exactly as hard as the one you choked down this morning. A child darts in front of you, barefoot, laughing as if this whole muddy, chaotic street is a playground. A dog trots by with something in its mouth that you really hope is a stick, but deep down, you know it isn't. The smell hits you next. You've been trying to ignore it all day, but as night falls and the air gets colder, it condenses around you like an unwelcome blanket. Smoke from a dozen fires mixes with the stink of animals, the sweet-sour odor of spilled ale, and the indefinable tang of things that have been rotting since before you got here. Even your own clothes have joined the mix. No matter how hard you try to breathe through your mouth, it's everywhere. By the time you reach the edge of the market square, you realize your stomach is aching. Not from hunger, though that's part of it, but from the way it twists in rebellion at the food you've been forcing into it. Dinner doesn't promise much. Maybe more bread, maybe a thin stew that tastes mostly like warm water, maybe a bit of cheese if you're lucky. Every bite is a gamble. Has it spoiled? Is that odd flavor the spice they used, or is it just age? And if you do get sick, well, you already know how medieval medicine works. Let's just say you wouldn't put much hope in the cure. You think back to earlier in the day when you overheard someone talking about how many people die young here. You didn't want to listen too closely, but you can't shake the words. Sickness comes fast, accidents come faster, and everything depends on how tough your body is. And if you've been raised with Wi-Fi and modern plumbing, the odds are not in your favor. The sun is low enough now that the wind picks up. It cuts through the streets, bringing with it all the dampness from the day. There's no jacket thick enough for this chill, not when everything you own seems to hold on to the wet like a sponge. You pull the coarse wool of your borrowed cloak tighter, but it just scratches at your neck. Every gust of wind feels like a reminder. You don't belong here, city person. Go home. You find yourself longing, aching even, for a door you can close and lock. For a chair that doesn't wobble. For a light that turns on without a match. For a mattress that isn't made of straw and mouse droppings. You dream of a pillow that isn't lumpy, of sheets that smell faintly of laundry soap instead of centuries-old fabric. You even miss the sound of a refrigerator humming in another room. Things you never thought of as luxuries now feel like miracles. As the night grows darker, you try to distract yourself by watching the people around you. They're used to this. They know how to live in a world without filters. They don't flinch when mud splashes up their legs. They don't hold their breath when the smell of the tanner's workshop wafts over. They laugh easily, talk loudly, and keep going because that's what life is. You admire them for it. You really do. But that doesn't change the fact that after just one day, you feel like a guest overstaying your welcome. Eventually you head back to the place where you're supposed to sleep. The room looks even smaller than it did last night. There's a single candle flickering in the corner, throwing long, shaky shadows across the walls. A couple of mice scurry along the floor, bold enough not to hide from you anymore. You sit on the straw mattress and immediately feel bits of it sticking through your clothes, poking you like rude little reminders. The air inside is no warmer than the air outside. There's no escape from the cold. You wrap yourself in the blanket, but it smells faintly of smoke and someone else's sweat. You think of the soft, freshly washed sheets back home, the ones you always forgot to appreciate. You'd give anything for them now. Lying there, staring at the uneven ceiling, the sounds of the village creep in through the thin wooden walls. Someone is arguing in the next room. A baby starts to cry. Somewhere far away, a dog barks. And just as you're about to drift off, you hear a scratching sound behind you. Probably another rat. You pull the blanket over your head and try not to think about it. There's a point during the night when your body finally admits defeat. You're shivering, you're hungry, and your brain is busy listing every reason why you don't belong here. You miss hot showers. You miss food that doesn't taste like history. You miss electricity and medicine and privacy, and even things as simple as a chair that doesn't threaten to collapse every time you sit down. Most of all, you miss the feeling of being able to choose. Here there's no choice. You don't choose when you wake up. The church bell does that. You don't choose what you eat. The harvest and the market decide. You don't choose what you wear, it's whatever rough fabric you can get. Even the weather gets the final say in how your day goes. You roll onto your back, sighing, and for a moment you imagine you could just reach into the air and swipe like you're unlocking your phone. If only there were a button marked Exit Medieval Europe. If there were, you'd press it so hard your finger would leave a dent. Historians sometimes like to romanticize this time period. Stone castles, knights in shining armor, beautiful tapestries. And sure, there's beauty here. There's a kind of closeness to the land, to each other, that's easy to admire from a distance. But when you're actually living it, the poetry fades and what's left is hard work, constant discomfort, and a life that never lets you stop moving. And as much as you've learned today, as much as you've marveled at the resilience of the people around you, there's no escaping the truth. You, with your soft hands and your soft bed waiting somewhere far away, you wouldn't last. Not for a week, not even for another day. When you finally close your eyes, the thought forms as clear as the bell that will wake you tomorrow morning. If someone opened a door right now, a glowing, modern door that led back to your bed and your Wi-Fi and your life, you would run through it without looking back. Because as fascinating as this place is, it's not your place. And if you're lucky, you'll make it back before the rats start chewing on your blanket. The night is deep now. The kind of deep that swallows the last clatter of pots, the last footsteps in the mud, until only the faintest crackle of a fire and the hush of the wind remain. You've made it through. One whole day. And lying here, you realize what that really means. It means you felt everything this world had to throw at you. The hunger that started with a bite of bread so hard it almost broke your teeth. The chill that sank into your bones before the sun had even climbed halfway into the sky. The work that never seemed to stop, no matter how much you wanted to rest. The noise, the closeness, the smell, the weather. All the tiny discomforts that never let you breathe for a single moment. You thought it would just be different. Rustic. Slower. Maybe even a little bit romantic. But now you know. You know what it's like to crave one quiet corner and realize there isn't one. To look for a meal and find only something stale and sour. To search for clean water and be told to drink ale because the stream will make you sick. To try to be strong only to be worn down by the little things one after another, until even your hope feels tired. And here, as the day finally loosens its hold, there's no mistaking it. This isn't a life you could just get used to. Not in a week. Not even in a month. It's a life that demands a toughness you never had to grow. A life shaped by mud and wind and hands that never stop working. This is why you wouldn't last a day in medieval Europe. Not because you're weak. Not because you don't want to try. But because this place asks for all of you, every second. And after one single day you already know, you've given everything you can give. You feel it in your legs when you try to stretch out. You feel it in the sting of your cold fingers. You feel it in the ache behind your eyes. And yet, right here in this narrow bed, something begins to soften. The noise fades. The harsh edges of the day blur, the way a painting blurs when you take a step back. You can hear the night breathing outside. The shutters tap lightly against the wall. Somewhere far away, a cartwheel creaks as it rolls home. All of it so slow, so ordinary that for the first time today you can almost let go. Your thoughts, which have been running since dawn, begin to slow too. They move from the heavy rain on your face, to the endless fields that wave under the wind, to the crooked roofs of the town, huddled close like tired shoulders. You think of the people you saw today, faces lined with the kind of strength that only comes from doing this day after day after day. And for a moment, you almost admire them enough to forget your own exhaustion. But you also know, you're not one of them. You are a visitor. And soon this long, strange dream will release you. The blanket smells faintly of wood smoke. It clings to everything here, but now it's not so bad. It smells like the end of the day. You take one deep breath and then another, slower. Somewhere in that long, steady breathing, your thoughts return to the life you left behind. To a soft bed waiting for you. To water that runs clear from a tap. To light at the flick of a switch. To the quiet luxury of choosing to close a door and be alone. Those things so ordinary at home feel like treasures now. And knowing that makes you smile even in the dark. The candle beside you flickers lower and lower. Its light trembles on the rough walls, the shadows growing taller, then softer, then gone. There's nothing left to do. You've made it through your one day. And that's enough. Outside the wind has dropped. The sky has opened to a stretch of stars. The same stars you know, though tonight they seem older, slower, as if they've been keeping watch over this town for centuries. They don't ask for anything. They only shine. And so, at last you let yourself rest. You pull the blanket up, close your eyes, and let the weight of this whole day, its mud and noise and strangeness, slip away like a heavy coat falling from your shoulders. Slowly you drift, farther and farther, until the sounds of this old world become no more than a faint lullaby. And in that quiet, you find yourself already on the edge of home. Sleep now. You've walked far enough. The doors of this day are closing, and on the other side of them, there's a place where the sheets are soft, and the air is gentle, and the only thing left for you to do is dream. Good night, traveler. Rest easy. I'll see you on the other side.